Hi, everybody. And if my voice kind of crackles, I told you last time on the last show here a few days ago that I had that 30-day cough. That's a 30-day CT cough. Don't want to say no more about that, but a lot of people's had it, and I'm kind of grumbly. Makes for a lower voice, but it makes me cough every once in a while. This is Dave Emmons in a strange reality show, and my guest is a return guest. He's a great guy. I've had him on the show several times. Very knowledgeable. He covers so many subjects that I can probably call him back every month and have something different to talk about. But we're going to be talking to Mark Olly. He's from the UK. He's an internationally recognized author, TV producer, presenter, writer, lecturer, broadcaster, musician, and artist. He is a visiting lecturer. Excuse me, there's the cough. He is a visiting lecturer at Wilmslow Guild and the University of Chester. Heads Up on Archaeology Unit. That's the code it's called. It's called Heads Up, his own archaeological unit, and runs a DVD production and props company, Mythco. He lives in UK and he's in rock and roll bands, and he's been in Copperworm Band, now Wolf Band, I guess, right?
Yeah, that's where I am. Well done.
Yeah.
You managed to get through that bit anyway.
Yeah. I didn't think I'd have this much trouble
Your audio's disappeared.
I did that to call.
Yeah.
I don't want to, confuse him. You can't get it over the radio or the internet. You can't get it.
I know. I'm safe.
But everybody else, I'm not in a spreading. I've had it 30 days or more, so I'm not in a spreading thing. So you spread usually the first 3 or 4 days. If you got a light fever or whatever, then that's when you spread it when you first get it, and then after that, it just goes into you, and that frog gets right there in the throat. And I'm talking through a frog now. I got to give him a name. I've known him for so long, but the Philippines was great. Like I was telling people, Mark, and uh, I just started doing the shows again just this past 3 or 4 days. But I want to be talking about something. You give me a list of things, and you got all kinds of topics that you can really cover, and that's what I enjoy about you. And not only that, that you're a great guy, musician, fellow musician, and you've opened for the Rolling Stones, and that impressed me quite a bit. And you have an album out, and you're working with that Wolf Band, I guess now, right?
Yeah, we are. We've got a major summer gig coming up. I think we've been together about, 40 odd years now, 44, 45 years. So I've always been there in the background. We started off in high school and we're still here now.
That's great. I mean, I've played for about 42 years myself, and I can share those feelings. And I got a little buddy over my right shoulder here on the bottom right of my screen, and it just appeared just a few days ago on my first show, and it's got into my photos in my background on Zoom, and I don't know how anything can get into my photos in Zoom where I get my background from on my green screen. So that's weird. It's just okay. It looks like
It's like the universe has signed its signature in the bottom corner of your picture.
yeah, kind of weird. It looked like a face with two eyes and a mouth and a little mask or something on it. But people can tell me what they think it is. But to me, it's strange. I get these strange things all the time, like computers. So Mark and I was talking about that. And if you're electrically charged, and it I guess it matters what your mind is thinking, your consciousness. If it gets really charged, I think you can mess with electronics and like lights blinking. Two computers went berserk in a couple of different shops that I went to yesterday, and it was kind of weird. People can write in and tell us if they've had these same experiences. I know I've had other people talk about their electrical experiences and being shocked and electrical items they can control. That comes from various, I guess, components. Mark, what do you think about that?
Well, as I was saying earlier on when we were coming into the interview, I have the opposite problem, and that is that anything that's touch screen doesn't seem to see that I exist. So, things like touchscreen computers, your laptops, your palm tops, your mobile phones, even things like, the touch screens on sat navs and things on parking garages that they want you to touch, things like that. I just don't exist, it's crazy. So it's buttons. I'm a buttons guy,
Oh, okay, yeah, I have the same thing when I sometimes when I can't get my camera on my phone to work, I keep touching it, hitting it. I give it to my wife, said, "You take the picture." She hits it, it flashes, it goes.
That's it. That's the story of my life.
Me too. So people out there, if they hear us talking about that, those are strange things that do happen, and we don't know why really. But Mark Olly, a very impressive guy, big background. He's a little bit of everything, and he's written 9 books, and now he's got the Roswell. It's the UK's Roswell event that his latest book is, and we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about UFOs, but a lot of the things that we want to look at. What's going on today? People are talking biblical now, and
Mm.
they're talking devil, they're talking evil. They're talking, evil things that's going on the planet. So, Mark, would you like to start off with the mysterious Bible and biblical stuff that you've researched in?
Well, yeah, I can launch in. I'm going to take the basic theme of the next book because I've got a book I'm working on. It's got the working title, "The Keys to the Temple." Now, I know there's already a book out called that, but it's only a working title. It might end up being "The Keys to the Templars" or "In Search of the Keys to the Templars." It's going to have something along those lines. And what I'm trying to do is it's noticeable that at the start of every millennium, so the first millennium, the second millennium, and now as we're drifting into the third millennium, it's noticeable that the biblical material keeps coming forward. It kind of reinvents itself, if you like, regenerates. So round about, going through 100 AD, by the time you reach 100 AD, there's loads going on. You've got Dead Sea Scrolls, Nag Hammadi Library, Biblical Apocrypha, all of the New Testament was generated then, all up to the time that the Romans destroyed the temple. So that all happened in that first century. Then you kind of fast forward, and between 1000 and 1100, you had the nasty Normans. You had basically the invention of what we now know as inverted commas Catholic medieval Christianity, which was a form all of its own. You had the Crusades, and you had the Templars, and you had all that side of it. There was so much going on at that point. So that's kind of between, like I said, going across the millennium between 1000 and 1100. And now, lo and behold, here we are. We're living in science fiction. We're in, 2024. So the same things happen now, 2000 going up to 2100. We're sat in that same gap. So really, it's in me to do it, and it's on my mind to do it, is to go back and have a look at what was happening at the same kind of historical moment, 1,000 years ago, and then 2,000 years ago. There might be a hint of something even further back than that creeping in as well, but I'm finding the adventure quite extraordinary even now.
Yeah, I people are talking about it. If you watch the internet, and which I do because the mainstream media is so far off, they just only give you a little skim of what's going on. But I've been watching a lot of these scientists and professors talk about the Bible and talking about they're actually anti-Bible. They think it was written to control people, and it wasn't written by the people they say it was written by in the Bible. And you can look at this and with open, if you got an open mind like I do, you're going to listen to this stuff and you're going to compare it with what you got to, from your past. But everything we know, they're saying is totally wrong. History is totally wrong. Now, Mark, your impression of the Bible, was it actually written by the people that actually wrote it, or are these scientists onto something?
I have a slightly different approach because, as you know, I've got this kind of shoot it's a duck attitude. If it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And we've got far, far more supporting evidence for what was written in that first century than we have for, say, Shakespeare. Like you say, history, it's difficult to get evidence, so far retrospective. But there's an absolute landslide of stuff that's associated with biblical material because it's been around for so long. Um, you've also got to bear in mind that the Old and the New Testament, the two parts of the Bible, are 66 separate books. So when people start to question, different parts of it and authenticity of different parts of it, take, for example, just one, which I know for a fact the viewers will be able to, the listeners will be able to find. If you go back to the Old Testament, you look at the book of Isaiah up to fairly recently, up to the 1940s, 1950s, the oldest version of that book of Isaiah to exist was in the AD period. And then they found the Dead Sea Scrolls. And lo and behold, one of the Dead Sea Scrolls is the book of Isaiah. But the difference is it's a lot older. It goes back into the BC period. So there is support for an awful lot of what you find in biblical material, Old Testament, coming in from archaeology, discoveries like Dead Sea Scrolls, Nag Hammadi Library, Old Testament Apocrypha. There's a shed load of material just there. And then probably what those experts are having a go at will be the authenticity of the New Testament, which actually is easier to prove as authentic. So to answer your original question, the last person, the last writer, if you like, to survive out of that biblical bunch of folks, if you like, was the Apostle John. And John only died on Patmos between 93 and 96 AD. They've actually got John's gospel from the wrappings of a mummy that dates back to around 120, 130 AD. So in less than one generation, one lifetime of the death of John, his gospel was already being copied, because this is a copy. So it's almost like, they all got together, in a pub somewhere in Jerusalem, and they all exchanged notes. They all wrote their own version of what they remembered, and no doubt some of them had a bit of an argument. So I don't remember it like that. That's not how I'm going to write it this way, because that's how I remember it, which is exactly what you'd expect to happen. And they all did it. And there are surviving snippets that hint at pretty much all of it being put together between 70 AD and say 160 AD. In that time gap, there are documents that support pretty much all of things like the Gospels in that period, because they got together, they wrote them down, then they started copying them out. The other obvious thing to mention is anything that's extra. So you do get a lot of other material. The New Testament Apocrypha, again, Dead Sea Scrolls, Nag Hammadi Library, all these odd Gospels turning up now, Gospel of Mary, Gospel of Judas, all these different things are being found. And then, you've also got Josephus and some of the historians mentioning what's going on. There's so much circumstantial evidence to back it up that certainly by the time you're in the 2nd century, the Bible is pretty much taking shape. It's starting to happen post destruction of the temple, because up to that point, most people forget in the 1st century there's no Christians, there's no Jews, none of those people have been named. They're all just different offshoots of this Middle Eastern developing religion. The problem that I think the experts are having is trying to get past 300 AD, because in 300 AD, you've got Constantine the Great becomes the Roman Emperor. He effectively, in his edict of I think it's Edict of Milan, 313 to 316 AD, round about that period, he effectively legalizes the ability to follow Christianity. Now, everybody says, oh, he became a Christian and, he made it possible. He only became a Christian on his deathbed. So actually, when he died, he converted. But up to that point, you couldn't really, with the Romans in charge, you couldn't really be confident of being a Christian. After that, so when you get into sort of the later 300s, I am probably going to agree with the experts. I think there's an awful lot of mucking about that went on, and additions and subtractions and bits of changes, and that's where the problem starts. So if you can get hold of stuff that's from the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd century, I think you're on fairly safe ground. Hence taking me back to where I came in with the idea of doing this book. What was around at the turn of the 1st millennium, and how did that then affect what ended up happening at the turn of the 2nd millennium? And lo and behold, here we are at the turn of the 3rd millennium. Let's get it all together and see where we've come this far.
King Constantine, as you alluded to, he wasn't he the one who saw the big cross in the sky, and that's where he got the idea. He was in a battle or something, and there's a
Battle of Milvian Bridge. Yeah, he had a vision. He had a vision of in the sky, in this sign
Mhm.
you shall conquer, was what he saw. But you've also got to remember, as a an emperor and as a Roman soldier, he worshipped Sol Invictus, which is, the victorious sun.
Mhm.
So seeing something like that, a vision of a shape in the sun, was definitely a military vision. Now, yes, it's been Christianized since, and everybody's gone, oh yeah, it was a cross like that, so he put it XP on his on his shield and all this, that, and the other, and so on. That's part of the degeneration process, because that is clearly not the right shape
Right. Yeah.
for a cross.
Right.
It's a vision. It's a military vision.
What these are other what these experts are saying, or I'd say, I guess, biblical scholars, scientists, they're saying there wasn't Christianity until 320 AD with Constant. He started Christianity. Constantine did. So back in 32 AD with Christ, there wasn't any Christian.
No, they're actually absolutely correct. It's interesting because the shape of the cross, which of course doesn't work, you can't physically
Right.
use that to crucify someone. That comes about in the third century, essentially, end of the second, beginning of the third century. The term Christian was a Roman insult, and there's a bit of debate as to where that started. The first people to be called Christians were possibly in the Middle East, possibly in Italy, in Rome, or possibly even in the UK. But certainly by the end of the second century, that label existed. But as I was saying at the beginning, if you were into the Old Testament up to the destruction of the temple, you were actually a Hebrew. You were a follower of the Hebrew
Right.
race, the Hebrew nation, because Jews per se, Judaism, doesn't really come into play till you pass 100 AD. You're going into the second century. Christians, you're looking at end of 200 AD going into 300 AD. Christianity as we understand it, which is Roman Christianity, you're looking really at sort of the 300s. So by the time you get into the end of 300 AD, going into 400 AD, certainly from an archaeological perspective, the first evidence of those Christians that we'd recognize today actually only starts then. So, the experts are probably true. If Christ was to come back now and walk into a church, he wouldn't recognize any of it.
Okay, that's
Not
what I was going to get to. The books
there.
that you mentioned earlier, the ones that were left out, there's four. I think had a lot of information in them, and but they left them out because they didn't fit the church's narrative, and that's the Roman Catholic Church at that time, what they were starting in Rome, and that's Enoch, Thomas, and it's Judah, and then Mary Magdalene book. They didn't want those for sure in there. Could you tell us why each one of those were so difficult for Constantine to accept? And
Okay, I'll run backwards. Gospel of Mary is a Gnostic gospel that, as you say, extols the virtues of the feminine, and it very strongly implies that Jesus had chosen Mary as a disciple, which puts her on a level with apostles. Which wasn't gonna scan with the Catholics. The Gospel of Judas is an interesting one because, again, that's Gnostic, but that gives a different perspective on the crucifixion, which, funnily enough, goes down some of the routes that modern day scholars have actually debated. How did it happen? What happened? What did they see? What was the outcome? You know, and actually, I'm a bit sympathetic to Judas because at the end of the day, he was only doing what he was told to do.
yeah, really. And I
And
wrote that in my third book, Angels and Supernatural Entities. I got Bible verses in there, and it said Judah. Here's what Judah told the
yeah,
high priest when they were going to the Garden of Gethsemane to get Jesus. They Judah told him, said he's a shapeshifter. He can change into a tall blonde. He can have no beard. He can have blue eyes, or he can look like an
yeah,
really. And they said, well, how are we going to identify him? Well, this is kind of a secret thing that people they sometimes miss. Judah said, "I will kiss on him on the cheek, and that will be Jesus." And
yeah.
so, how come he had to do that? Why couldn't they just know right out that this was the guy, Jesus Christ? Mark, and then Judah said during the time when Jesus asked Peter, and I think he asked Paul, he said, "Who do you think I am?" And then I think Peter said, "You are the Lord God." And then he looked at Judah and said, Judah, who do you think I am? He says, I know who you are. So were
Mm.
they in cahoots? I mean, were they? I mean, I put in my book, and this is going to drive people crazy, that they were extraterrestrial. So was Mary Magdalene. She knew too much. She was in on it too. So the three of them, they come from somewhere else. And I'm not trying to diminish Jesus Christ. Well, actually, that's when when you're born from angels or whatever, you're an extraterrestrial some way or another, and you're
Well,
different else. Yeah,
by by literal definition, everything that happens right through the whole of the Bible, all 66 books, everything that's miraculous, or coming from the sky or appearing in visions or whatever, all of that by modern day definition could be regarded as extraterrestrial.
right.
Is God? Is God extraterrestrial? What is God? It's one of those incredible, difficult questions, which it kind of leads to the first two books that you mentioned. One was Gospel of Thomas, which actually in the early church was regarded as part of the Bible. It's not a crazy gospel, that one. That's actually quite solid and straightforward. But there are bits in there that the church took odds with. And then if you go all the way back to the very beginning, what was the one you mentioned at the start? Was
Book of Enoch. There's
Enoch.
three books. Yeah.
Right, Enoch's a difficult one, and I'm going to have to go down a deep rabbit hole to take you through Enoch because there's a simple answer, but it's a deep one. In Enoch's Old Testament, basically, it's Old Testament Apocrypha, so you've dropped into a different era. And what happens with the Old Testament is all of the scrolls that were produced had to be copied absolutely perfectly by the scribe. So you need this background information to follow where I'm going with this. So the idea of error creeping in doesn't happen. So the old Isaiah scroll from the BC period, letter for letter, matches the same one that appears in the AD period because they're copying it. If you made a mistake, you had to wrap the scroll up in a shroud, put it in a box and bury it in the desert and start again, which is a bit of a swine if you do in Isaiah because that scroll takes about 3 years to write by hand. But if you made a mistake at the end of that, that's exactly what you had to do and start again. So all of the books follow and obey the original Hebrew letters and the original Hebrew letter codes. Now, forget Michael Drosnin and his Sudoku and all that. That's a cover-up. That's absolute nonsense. The actual original codes, the ones that the Jews now preserve and know exist, run through all of those books. And that really, if I'm being honest, is how they decided which 66 books were in the Bible and which weren't. Because in Greek, Aramaic, and also in original Hebrew, all of those books obey the Bible code. Now then, back to the one you just mentioned, that has Bible code in it. So there are pieces of that book, parts of that book that are clearly, to use their own terminology, divinely inspired. But some parts of it are not, which then make you wonder who stitched it all together, because clearly there was an original book. Clearly, there is material in there that's valid, but you've got to be able to sort out the wood from the trees. Somebody somewhere down the line who didn't really know what they were doing messed that book up a bit, which is a shame because there is some interesting material in it. So that's those four that you've mentioned. Really, they've all got merits, but
Right.
different kinds of merits.
It doesn't fit the church's narrative. And you just said a while ago, Jesus Christ come back
Yeah.
and he visited the churches.
Mm.
He'd be angry because they're not teaching what they're supposed to be teaching in church. Could you tell us what they're lacking, Mark, on the preaching?
Okay. We
The,
might be here. We could be here a while, but I'll
yeah,
try and boil it all down.
yeah, do that.
Uh,
I know, throwing you a lot of luggage to unpack here, but
hey, no,
but
fire away.
I depend on you. You're very knowledgeable. You know all these topics, and I'm sitting here thinking, okay, I'm going to throw this. I want to see what kind of because
Yeah.
I know what kind of answers I have for it, but they may not be right. So I'm looking for people like yourself that have studied and researched this a lot more than I have that might
Okay.
fill me in. Could you tell me?
Okay. Well,
We have that problem nowadays. A lot of people are leaving the church, and people are saying God is not in our countries, or we're not living morally right. corrupt, there's too much corruption in the world. That's why we're taking this direction, Mark, on all these subjects.
Right. Okay. Here we go. All those years of Bible college. Here we go. I'm going to dive in.
Okay, there you go.
The, right. Well, you mentioned that we're not sort of living a holy life. We're not. We're all sinners, etc., etc. The bottom line is, and you've got to bear this in mind, the Bible is there not only to tell us that we're wrong, but to prove beyond all possible doubt that we're wrong. So there is absolutely no way we can live up to God's standard. Forget it. It's never going to happen. But that's not an excuse for us to go, chaotic and this, that, and the other, because salvation, being saved, getting, across the finishing line, getting into heaven, being taken at the second coming, whatever you want to call it, however you want to look at it, just dying, passing over to the next dimension, whatever. The actual bottom line is, did you or did you not do what God told you to do? Now that's different. That's not obeying a set of rules. That is personal and it's to the individual. And that's why people like Judas, you might actually find Judas in heaven because he did as he was told.
Right.
You might potentially find the devil in heaven because he did as he was told. You'll almost certainly find Eve in heaven because she did as she was told. And that's the bottom line. The bottom line is whatever you are being told by the highest, greatest, most powerful power in the entire cosmos, that's what you should be focusing on. Now, there are limits, obviously, you can measure against the Bible. The Bible, if you follow your witchcraft and paganism, it's the greatest book of shadows ever written because it's 3,500 years of people's personal experiences and personal encounters with the divine. So it has to stack up. It's got to add up. You can use it as a measure.
Mhm.
So the next question is, what happens when you apply that to the church? When you take that measure and you start looking at what's going on? Well, first of all, my advice to anybody is if you're not happy where you are and you're looking around the church and thinking, this is all about money, politics, power, leadership, ego, whatever, leave. Just don't be there. Just go somewhere else because that's not what God's all about. You can measure it against, what you do know about God and just go. You're not supposed to be there. And again, looking through those 66 books of the Bible, it does not tell you anywhere how to build a church.
Mhm.
None of it. That's the simple, easy answer. Okay. Your festivals, your colors of the year, your denominations, your theology, your buildings, where you put your buildings, building design, the whole, shed load of stuff that's out there. None of it is in the Bible. It's not there. It
Okay.
just isn't.
Yeah, we talk about we talk about the churches with their teaching. They teach fear, and the Bible is
Yeah.
actually written to control people. Is that true? I mean, King, I think it was a king back in the 13th century, King George, or he had the Bible written in English language.
Oh, James. Yeah, you're thinking of James
Uh,
1611 edition.
yeah,
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 yeah. His idea was following on from the Anglo-Saxons. Alfred the Great did it first in the 800s over here. There was no Bible written in the common language. Nobody could read it. And that's how the church got away with all of what they did during the medieval period.
Latin.
Because, yeah, it was all in a foreign language. It was all done behind closed doors, behind screens. You had to join orders like the Hospitallers, the Templars, etc., to get access to this material. So the whole of that sort of, collection of stuff only came about because of controlling the Bible. So the 1611 version was King James over here basically going, do you know what we could do with this in English? Alfred tried to put it into English, Anglaise, Anglo-Saxon. He tried to do it and made a start. I think he got 2 or 3 of the books, done, but not the whole thing. And so, King James got the best scholars that he could find at the time, and he put the 1611 edition together. Now, since then, we've come up with better editions. Okay, don't go for any of the modern ones. Forget like the Good News and the New International, all that. Go for something like the New Revised Standard Version or the original Revised Standard Version, because that includes all of the new discoveries that were made at the time. So the Dead Sea Scrolls materials in there, the New Testament Apocrypha material and Old Testament is in there. So if you want a big, nice, round version of all of that material that you can read, go for that. Go for the Revised Standard Version. King James is a laugh. Absolutely love it. You've got all sorts of strange things in there.
I, let me ask you this. The reason why I'm bringing up the churches, I don't. I've been to many churches. I've been to a lot of, and I see the same people after 5 years going up front and asking for extra prayer, for extra money, or for a job, or for betterment of their life. And I see them 5 years later, they're asking the same thing. Now, is the church helping? I don't think so. I think it's you that you have to do things. But they teach fear in churches. They say if you sin, that you're going to burn in hell. And you have to give. There's so much money you can give to the church. You got to pay 10% to the church, and they try to make you feel guilty about that. And I got a question for you, Mark. Something that my wife asked me. She's a kind of religious fundamentalist, and a lot of people are. They get into Jesus and they get in the church, and you say things like, "I say," they could say, "You're blasphemous." You're not saying the right thing. But when I'm asked, "Is Jesus my savior?" I have a hard time with that because I wasn't alive when he forgave everybody's sins back then. Does that mean that I can do anything I want after Jesus, forgive me of my sins, Mark?
One of the things that really annoyed me very early on is that, actually they come out with all these statements like that. There was a big phase of it. Are you saved, brother? Are you washed in the blood of the Lord? Basically they're meaningless, absolutely meaningless. And if you actually get hold of most of the people in authority and go, well, what does that mean? Tell me what it means, and don't back off. Just keep asking them, what does it mean? What does it mean? What does it mean? They will crumble very quickly. They'll fall apart very quickly because they don't understand what Jesus actually did. Really, what you've got to do is you've got to appreciate Jesus is the fulfillment. He is the embodiment of absolutely everything that happened in the Old Testament before him, right? So that's all of it. So all the rules, the laws, the sacrifices, the different rules and regulations, the way things were done, all of that comes together in Jesus. And what Jesus is saying is, he's saying, right, instead of all these sacrifices and all this, that, and the other, it's going to be, one sacrifice does the lot. This is one death will solve the lot. It'll solve it completely. And what he does is he gets himself crucified. Now, the way he gets crucified is really telling, because forget all this idea of dovetailing, gluing, roping, screwing, and all this to try and put a cross together, and then trying to get something on a single beam to stand upright. The Romans didn't do it like that. They were doing between 600 and 800 crucifixions a day, so they weren't going to waste time on that. What they did is they put two uprights in place, and you carried a thing called a stauros, which is a beam. It's not a cross, it's a beam. It's a wooden beam. So when he was crucified, he comes walking up Golgotha, with Simon of Cyrene carrying this socking great big piece of tree. And he gets to the top of Golgotha, and sure enough, the upright posts are already concreted in. The Romans have already concreted them all in. So anyone getting crucified, they just dump the stauros on top. There it is. It's already up. Nail you to that, nail you to the uprights. Now, consequently, that means the shape of the cross is actually, are you ready? That's the best way I can do it. So there's your two uprights, and there's the beam going on top.
Kind of like
That
American football field goal.
correct. Now that shape, this is where it gets important. That shape, John's gospel tells you, that shape that he was crucified on is the letter ket, which is two downstrokes and a cross stroke. That letter ket means life. It's also the letters they painted on the doors in the Old Testament for the angel of death to pass over. So it means life. So you can imagine it. All the Jews are kind of looking, well, not Jews at this point, the Hebrews, they're looking at this crucifixion going, do you know what? Even when he's dying, he's still preaching the same message. Because as he dies, the temple curtain, which remember is two doorposts and a lintel with this curtain hanging, tears down the middle. So now the Holy of Holies in the temple is wide open because he's fulfilled all the laws, he's fulfilled everything. All the sacrifices have come to an end. He's the ultimate sacrifice. As he dies with his arms and legs nailed apart, as the sacrifice on four, four horns on the altar, as it were, four nails of crucifixion. As he dies, that doorway is wide open. Now, that is literally, according to John's gospel and according to all the prophecy in the Old Testament leading up to that point, that is literally what he does. He literally kicks open the door to heaven. And he says, anybody that gets that, anyone that understands that message, that this door is now wide open, can go through that door. Now, if you think about that internationally, multi-faith wise, I mean, back in the Bronze Age, they had this idea that doors were portals from one world to another. You've got the Torii archways and the Shinto gateways. You've got the Greek triumphal arches and the temple doors. You've got the Romans building triumphal arches. This idea of an entrance going from one dimension, if you like, to another. As long as you believe that, as long as you believe what I've just said, and that's what Jesus did, so you've done away effectively with all of the Old Testament nonsense, all the rest of it, you've accepted that that is a way in and that the door's open, then off you go.
Is that
You're in.
is that what when Jesus said, my father has many mansions, he meant dimensions probably, and the people weren't smart enough to pick it up. The other thing too is that Jesus taught love, forgiveness, and he taught that there's an afterlife. Those are the
Yes.
important things that he taught that I could see. And that's why I know he was from somewhere else to come here and tell us. And he was an enlightened individual, spiritual individual who knew this stuff. He wanted to tell us that there is an afterlife. So we will go on. I got something else that I guess
Mm.
the age of the biblical stuff, and we talked about Enoch. Enoch, they were 1,000 years old. Methuselah and all of them in that family group, and even Noah, he was 960 years old. And they say it was 500 or 600 years. The Garden of Eden happened about 500 or 600 years before the Enoch era. But Enoch went into outer space. He was gone and he never come back. Is that?
Yeah, he walked with God and was not. He disappeared.
Yeah.
He was taken. One of several people, actually. It's called translation. I'm trying to think who else was translated. Body of Moses was taken. Enoch was taken. Elijah was taken. Elisha was taken. Let me think. Jesus was taken, for that matter. He ascended. So absolutely, it's not unique. There's a biblical precedent for it, if you like.
Oh,
The idea.
how far back, Mark, does that go? I mean, are we talking about something that was only 5,000 years ago, or are we talking about something that's longer?
Wow. Well, what you got to remember with the Old Testament is where it gets really interesting, especially the book of Genesis, is that the first 5 books, which are the Torah, all of those are written by an Egyptian, because Moses is second only to Pharaoh. He wrote those. So all of that information is coming from Egypt. So you've almost got to put yourself in a different mindset. This is why it's better to break the Bible up into 66 books and tackle them on merit, put them in context. So, we're going back to the beginning here. So what you're dealing with is material that he's picked out that he feels is particularly relevant to what's coming up. So the timescales are really important. To answer the observation that you made, though, about these enormous lifespans, it's exactly what you would expect to see if you do away with evolution. Scrap the idea that things are getting better, because they're clearly not. Scrap the idea that, a monkey can turn into a fish or an earthworm that can turn into a bird. Scrap all that, because that's just rubbish. It's not science. It's not the DNA we know now. So get real with it. Shoot, it's a duck. And at the end of the day, if the planet is devolving, if things are getting worse, and we've had floods and meteorites and fire strikes and goodness knows what other disasters we've had, the extinctions are all beginning to happen, but the atmosphere is also changing. Now, we know that things lived longer, lived better, grew bigger,
Right.
in the past
Mhm.
than they do now.
And they were
So
smarter.
now,
They were smarter too, right? They
of
knew.
course they were. Well, there were 27 different species of human beings that we know of.
Right.
And more so if you include the giants and you include Floor's Island, which are the little 3-foot hobbit people, and then you start looking at the Paracas with the enormous skulls, the massive heads. They're super intelligent. They've got brains 3.5 times bigger than us.
Yeah.
Imagine if one of those guys got born with the capacities of Einstein. And they're an entire race. You know,
Yeah,
we're talking
are
about
we
whole races of people.
are we talking about Nephilim? In Noah's day, Nephilim was around. They were the enemy of the people. They ate people. Actually, they were big, tall monsters things. And Jesus said, they asked him, when will the end times be? He said, only God will know the end times. But he said the end times could be marked as Noah's days. He said
Yeah.
the Nephilim were there, and the Nephilim come out, and he had to get away from them, and they had to destroy the Nephilim. God had to. And now they're saying this is relating to the present time. Like I said, I wanted us to push into the present time with the
Mm.
stuff, with the devil and with corruption and with lack of morals nowadays. Uh, it seems to me that we're repeating those days of Noah, and now they're starting to see giants, Nephilim. Have you heard about that here in the U.S.? They saw these giant ETs in Florida. I
Well,
don't so much believe, but are they coming back now, Mark?
well, in a biblical sense, you're actually correct, but the interpretation's a little bit off because the word Nephil or Nephilim in Hebrew just means mighty men, powerful men. So it can be applied to giants. It might be inaccurately applied to the offspring of angels and men
Right.
because they are what they are. There's some evidence that they're probably not what's being referred to by the term Nephil. In the Old Testament, Nephilim, they're actually referred to as Anakim. The Anakim, the Anak, or
Yeah.
sons of Anak, are actually the giants. So they're just mighty men of valor. So if you know that, if all you're looking for are mighty and powerful people, then absolutely, totally, 100%. I mean, let's face it, there are people now who are trillionaires. You know, these people have got unlimited resources, unlimited power. We don't even see them. You know, you've got these men in grey, these shadows,
Yeah.
these, we don't even know who's running the
Yeah,
show
the
anymore, you
elite.
know.
Yeah, well, we know
Yeah.
like Rockefellers, Rothschild, Soros, and those kind of guys. They're the elites that run the world, actually.
Well, I was going to say, if you actually know of their existence, then
Yeah,
chances are they're not the men in grey. The men in grey are the ones behind all of that, who you don't see, whose names you don't know, and they don't have anything to do with the media, but they are clearly there running the show. You know, clearly.
let me ask you about the Pope now.
Mm,
We're in this religious thing, and I know we got a lot to cover, but I'm trying to get to what's going on today. The
yeah,
confusion,
yeah.
chaos. Well, the Pope actually, he actually said that the evil one is here. The Antichrist. He's here on earth now. That's what the Pope said. He made that announcement this last week. Also, I heard there's three popes. You might explain this. There's a black one and there's a gray one. And actually, the Pope, the Pope that we see in public, the one that dresses in white, he kisses the ring of the black Pope. That's not that's not his race, the black Pope. He just wears black. And the Pope that wears white kisses the ring of the black Pope, and the gray Pope actually does all the work behind the scenes, and they kind of rule the world. Now, have you heard that, Mark?
I have heard of that, and I've got friends who are fairly high up in Catholicism that I've picked up over the years. And their attitude is that to some extent it's a misunderstanding of Catholic ceremonies that has led to what is essentially a folk tale, but it does have a point. And the point is that the guy in white is controlled by others. There's no doubt about that at all. So that part of that conspiracy is correct. There are men in grey. There's no doubt about that. So, you know, if you want to call somebody ruling the roost as a grey pope, but you don't actually know anything about him, then yes, that's plausible. And I think the guy in black is part of the ceremony. I think it's the it's saying goodbye to the past and evil and death and darkness, and that ceremonially that's part of that side of things. So in a sense it's become like a folk tale based on various realities that have been pulled together. And again, the devil, the antichrist, that's an interesting one because it was John that wrote Revelation, so a lot of the imagery is coming out of that and from the prophecies of Daniel. So if you start looking for characters, then there's definitely the false prophet, whoever the false prophet is. We need to look out for that. There is the Antichrist with whom the false prophet works,
Mhm.
and then there's the second coming, which is Jesus coming in the clouds with all his angels, as some would interpret it. So there are certain things happening there that we can keep a lookout for. But then backwind even further, back to what I was talking about, people being taken, translation, it ties up quite nicely. It's said that two prophets appear on the streets of Jerusalem, and it's Elijah and Moses, and they come back because technically, if you've never died, then you can come back. You can come back from that other dimension, and they do. They come back and they preach the coming of God. Now they get killed. They get shot for whatever they do, or whatever, and the bodies are left lying in the streets. And it says, every eye shall see these two people raised up, and they go up and they ascend into the heavens. Now, as a prophecy, that wasn't even possible till the invention of television. So, with the wonders of satellite television, I'm sure if something like that were to happen, we'd all be aware of it. We'd see it. It would pop up on the news feeds. That's the one I'm looking for. In terms of devil, the devil, this, red batwing guy with horns or whatever, that fallen angel is probably still here. And if I was a betting man, I would say he's probably 40 days and 40 nights away from Jerusalem in the direction of the desert, because that's where he was last seen. And do you know what? He doesn't have to do anything. It's the same principle as the gospel. It's the same principle as what Adam and Eve did. That is, you kind of drop the microphone and leave the room. You drop the idea, you drop the concept, you put that information into the system, and the system does the rest. And that is exactly what we're seeing. So the devil's probably got his wings wrapped around him, and he's curled up in a nice, neat ball in a nice, cozy cave somewhere out in the Middle East, asleep out in the desert, just waiting for the end to happen, because the rest of it will play itself out.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, Mark, I guess there's been some experts who are also saying that there is no such thing as a physical devil. The devil is in each one of us. We have evil and we have goodness in each one of us humans, because we see it, all the time. We see murderers and robbers and rapers.
well, that's kind of a roundabout way of saying what I just said. You know what I mean? Drop the mic, leave the room, and just let it play itself out. We are playing it out. We are literally playing it out. I suppose that's the meaty bit, the crux of the matter, and that is that you have these two alternatives. You can either listen to everything else, or you can listen to God. There's a spirit in God that you can be aware of, and you can learn to hear that. But that starts with an awareness. That's an awareness of knowing that God is, everything is in God and God is in everything.
right.
So in a way, there's no need to kind of dash off to the altar to pray. There's no need to do that, because
Inside.
God already, he already knows you prayed it before you prayed it, or should I say it already knows, because whatever God is, it's vastly bigger than us, huge.
Creator. I call him the creator. I've changed actually the prayer, our Father who art in heaven. I say our creator who art in heaven. So
Mm,
we're diminishing God by calling him a God, because we had gods all over the place in Egypt.
yeah, yeah.
But now I just look at it as the creator. See, so immense that we can't understand it. And he is in each one of us. I mean, we
Yeah.
have goodness and we have bad, I guess. All depends on what wife you talk to. So, but no, uh,
Yeah.
it's kind of like that. It's I see that when you pray, you're praying through yourself, and God is within you. It's a spiritual thing. I go into like spirituality a lot, and I like that more because I can communicate with the universe and with the creator. Like you said, we don't need to have a middleman at a church or something scaring us into,
Yeah, I mean, churchianity is a modern invention. It is the way it is now. There's no doubt about it. Times have changed. The baggage it's picked up in the last 2,000 years is unbelievable. I'm with everybody on that one. Majority of people are they're leaving the church in droves, because it clearly isn't what it was originally set up to be. But I would go further. I would say, well, don't give up on the church by all means, but don't give up on God. Because, if you come face to face with the divine because you're sat on a beach, or you're in a Buddhist temple, or you're sat under a tree, or you're lying on your car bonnet watching the stars and the meteorites, or you're in the bath. Some people have the best prayer times ever sat in the bath, just chuddering away to God, because, like I said, everything's in God and God's in everything. So it's almost stupid of us as human beings to believe that we can run and hide.
Right. Yeah.
Literally everything we do,
Well, I'm gonna
some of
take
it.
yeah, I'm gonna take a pause and just announce the show. This is Dave Emmons with The Strange Reality, and my guest is Mark Olly. He's from the UK and a wonderful guest. I love this guy. He's a fellow musician and he's good. He's big time and just about everything. He knows archaeology now. He knows biblical stuff. He's going to write a new book coming up about the biblical history and everything, and that's why we're talking something about it. But he's also got a new book. It's Roswell. It's the Roswell of the UK, and he's got that book. There it is, right there. And a lot of people have said it's a great book. I've heard about it already, and it's a story of what happened in the UK as compared to what happened here in New Mexico in 1947. Basically, it's a I guess after the government said they got nine spacecraft, UFOs, and they got bodies, about 8 or 9 bodies also that they're keeping in storage. We don't know what to believe. There's so much disinformation and everything. But staying on the biblical thing, because
Hmm.
right now we are so confused. Most people I talk to, they say they're unhappy. They said they don't know what's going to happen in the future. Our future is bleak and stuff. But you have to have the spiritual joy within yourself to keep faith of your own self that you're going to do the right thing and do the right thing. Like you said, that's what God or the creator wants us to do. He wants us to do what we're told to do and do the right thing and not be evil or bad or mistreat people, but be kind, loving, forgiving, like Jesus Christ said. And I believe that about Jesus Christ. Now,
Yeah.
after we talked about the devil a little bit and we explained that, could you explain Lucifer for me? Because there's so many pros and cons on Lucifer, Mark.
Wow. Well, that's kind of potted history on the devil. Lucifer is the morning star that's fallen.
Mhm.
It's the star that the star that fell like lightning from heaven. He dropped. He basically decided he was going to not so much. This is where it gets interesting because the Bible is very human in its descriptive content. And if you start picking out the 680 different references scattered through the Bible to the devil, so if you start pulling just those references out, his names, like you say, Lucifer, are telling, but it tells you a lot about the devil as well. The devil's purpose just seems to be to put forward the alternative view. Now that's his job. His job is to contradict, but he also very subtly does it using elements of the truth. So he's not automatically going to lie. He will use that art of persuasion to draw you in, which is what he did initially. I mean, he managed to attract a fair following from the angels, and the angels were just supposed to follow God, but some of them ended up following him. So there was a war in heaven, which I think screwed up the planet at the beginning. Fairly early on,
Mhm.
whatever was down here kind of got screwed up in this divine war. The only survivor actually of the fallen angels is Lucifer. The rest of the angels are gone. Some people debate the fact that maybe they are the spirits that later went on to form demons, but that's the whole spirit realm, the whole spirit world. That is a huge debate just on its own. But no, the devil's, I'll give you an example. I mean, Eve, where Eve, is stood next to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which was never originally intended for us to get involved in that decision making process, what's good and what's evil. And the devil just leans over and says, did God tell you not to eat of that fruit? And she sat there thinking, well, do you know what? God didn't tell me. Adam told me. So
Mhm.
she eats it. So the person in that story that's really disobedient actually is Adam, because Adam's the one that's not doing what God told him to do. God told him not to eat that fruit. So when Eve went, here, take a bite of that, he shouldn't have done it. Now,
Yeah.
I can see why he did it. He did it because he thought, well, she's not drop dead. And if I don't take a bite of that, she'll be different from me, and I want to be the same as her. So that whole conflict situation, is brought about by questioning the truth, but questioning in the wrong way, being diverted down the wrong track.
Mhm.
And it's really interesting as well. There's a hint of prehistory in there because at this point, the serpent, the devil, has legs. He's got legs, and the curse on the serpent was to lose the legs
He's a
and
reptilian.
slither.
Yeah.
slither on its body forever, from that point on. So there's a kind of a possession issue there as well. I don't think
Yeah. If
snakes
you get,
per se are
yeah,
evil.
Mark, when you get mixed in with ufology and the church things,
Uh,
actually say that devil, the snake, was actually a reptilian, an ET.
Well, again, that's another way of looking at it, But then, in my world, in archaeology and history, I mean, I also studied geology, which is a basic starting point, really, for archaeology. Once you know your
Right.
geology, you can move on from there. Well, I kind of studied that. And when you know how different, how dramatically different the world was way back then, reptiles did have an enormous place, an enormous kind of powerful ruling place in the ancient, fossil world. They're there in the fossil record, but they're not here now. They're gone. We, as rodents that we are, have risen up and, the rats have took over the ship. And that's where we're at. So all of that powerful part of history now has disappeared. It's all gone. So the reptilians are an issue. I think it's come about because people were debating what would happen if the reptilians had evolved in the same way as people assume that we've evolved. Well, they probably haven't, and neither have we, for that matter. We're devolving.
I think there's been some ufology studies and scientists who said the reptilians did evolve
Mm.
probably millions of years ago on this planet and went to other planets, but there's still a few of them here. And also, I think the Garden of Eden was a big DNA lab, whatever. And also,
Mm.
you talk about the DNA lab at the Garden of Eden, and then you talk about Noah. He didn't take two of every kind on that ship. He had to take DNA or he wouldn't be able to get everything on that ship. Uh,
Well, I mean, anybody that knows anything about taking scientific samples is you never only take one anyway. You take multiple,
right.
forms of whatever you take purely for safety, survival, and diversity. But, I mean, I always say this, you've got these dinosaurs called ultrasaurs, which are, hundreds of feet high and the size of, several tanks, and they're huge dinosaurs, but they all lay eggs. So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you can get a dinosaur in an egg this size, So for Noah to do that, for him to manage to fill the ark, I mean, the ark's huge, it's enormous. Take it from me, he only filled between 25 and 45% of it. The rest of it would have been filled of, stocks and things to keep it moving. He also had 3,000 years to develop that technology to arrive at the flood. We've only had 2,000, and look at where we are now, of technological development. So he knew a thing or two about a thing or two in that ancient world. What has survived since the flood is a different issue, because obviously some of the species that he rescued have done better than others. So we've got a really skewed situation now of what made it into the new world and what didn't. But Noah and the flood is fascinating topic. Um,
Yeah, I heard you, Mark, a while ago say something about there's 26 species of human beings on the earth. I know
there's 27 that we know from DNA analysis and from the fossil record.
how many
Um,
millions of years does that go back? Some scientists say 20, 30 million, 60 million, and now they found a princess. You heard that story? You might have picked up on that.
yeah, I picked up on that.
Do you believe that story? They said she's
Um,
a million years old.
right. Well, I think the problem you've got is one of survival, right across the board. Doesn't matter what your discipline is. Everybody will agree with that. The archaeologists, the scientists, the DNA people, the geologists, everybody. You name it. Everybody just automatically we just assume that not everything has survived, and all we're getting is a tiny percentage of stuff surviving.
Right.
And some of the things that survive, like the human species, you can't fix the date quite as specifically using science as perhaps the general public would like you to. So, excuse me, when people say, oh, this is X number of millions of years old, etc., somebody had to come up with that time scale at the beginning, and
Mhm.
somebody had to come up with, the devices and the mechanisms and the science to arrive at that. So at the end of the day, it's some of it is still open to debate. And some of those things that we find as fossils have survived. So they're not fossils, technically. It does, when you start sort of getting a look around the edges, it starts to fall apart a little bit. And plus the fact, anything that looks a bit sort of monkey-ish, monkey-esque, might just turn out to be a monkey.
Yeah. Yeah, really. Now let's finish off. I wanted to
Mm,
ask you a question about Lucifer, going in deeper.
mm,
Now, there's a lot of occults, and there's also some groups, I don't want to mention their names, that actually have Lucifer in the horns and all this other stuff,
mm.
and they actually worship Lucifer. Now, they said that Lucifer is not bad. He's actually the good and bright, shining light who brought intelligence to human beings, in which he was told not to. So his sin was teaching people technology. Am I following that right, Mark? What do you?
Well, from a biblical perspective, those people will be aware of the 680 references to Satan that come out of the Bible, the biblical material, to which they have bolted on a lot of other things, clearly. Um, I think I said right at the very beginning of the interview, you could be surprised to actually find that Lucifer ends up back in heaven. There's a couple of those references, like the book of Job, where God actually calls the devil in, calls him in and says, "Look, come in. I want to chat to you." And he comes because he has to. It's the Almighty that's ordering him around at this point,
Right,
and he's given a task and he's sent off to do a task. And people have put forward this very convincing argument and said, okay, well, what was he doing in the Garden of Eden in the first place? If God didn't create Satan and God didn't put him in the Garden of Eden in the first place, then it would never have happened. So clearly, if it goes all the way back to an almighty power, then it must all be part of the bigger plan. It's part of the bigger scheme of things. So, some of these guys that are running around, being super evil with, horns and the red pajamas and the whole 9 yards, I think they've got the wrong end of the stick. I think the image is wrong. I think the attitude is wrong. You're almost in a situation where, pardon the pun, the serpent is eating its tail. If you go far enough down the Luciferian Satanist route, you finish up arriving back at the Bible anyway, because nothing can exist without the Almighty Creator anyway.
right,
So some of these people are just people that just get off on being evil. They want to take that side. They want to be cool and be the way they are. But it's like everything else that us humans do. We have a certain creative power. That's something that we've got that sort of comes from the Almighty, and we can create what we want to create.
right,
And that's what these particular people are doing. I mean, I'm making very broad brushstrokes at this point. They probably do get a certain amount of benefit and power, etc., from this. I'm going to be really radical and say, so do people in churches, so do people in any kind of quote social club, depending on what you want to do, whatever floats your boat. But that doesn't really have anything to do with the reality and the power of an almighty creator. And it only has a passing sort of involvement, if you like, in the greater scheme of things, the greater plan. All of those things are just fragments. They're just tiny little pieces. Something you were saying earlier about people getting worried about this kind of thing, the devil under the bed and all this kind of stuff. So do we need to be worried about this? Is Satan going to rise up and it's going to be really bad and end times? And at the end of the day, I find myself as an archaeologist thinking that none of us, not one single person here today, will be alive in 100 years' time.
right. That's true.
We're all going to be gone.
Well,
That's where we're going.
yeah,
You know,
we go from birth to death, and it goes real.
yeah.
When the older you get, the faster it goes. Believe me. But
Well, yeah,
but with Lucifer, a lot of people, and they talk about this, and you see it on the news. This is just for education purposes only. This is
yeah.
not for real. I mean, I don't know which they talk about, and you talk about vampires. Now you have blood drinkers in these occults, and they use Lucifer as a standard, and they kind of get up in the evil thing. They dress in red and they drink blood, and you hear all these horrible stories, you don't know what to believe because there's so much disinformation.
Well, it all blossomed, didn't it, in the 70s and the 80s, and all went from there. You got Anton LaVey and his Church of Satan, and by the way, they're running around wearing dog collars now, which I find hilariously funny. You've got all of the horror film material, and
Yeah.
the Devil Rides Out and Crowley, and you name it. There's bucket loads of stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's all stuff. That's what it is. It's all stuff. Um, as I said, we can create and we can use and we can be whatever we want to be, really, at the end of the day. But that doesn't answer the question, the eternal question of, well, where are we going? Where did we come from? What about this almighty power that's in everything? What about life itself? Are we the unique planet in the entire cosmos, or is there more out there? Are we the only planet of choice? What's going on? As I say, none of us are going to be there because 100 years from now, we'll all have the answer. Because, we'll have done that. We'll have passed from one dimension to another, and we'll all be, we'll be there going, so, God, about that thing you did, what's that all about? And, it says something in the Bible, something as, at that point, you shall be known as you shall know. It's got that idea that at some point you'll completely know yourself and you completely know everything else as well, because at that point you passed over. So you kind of, past the end of the road looking back, which is a different scenario altogether. And it's these higher things, these higher aspirations I think we should be pushing forward to. I mean, the whole devil image, Baphomet and all the rest of it, it was Eliphas Levi came up with that in an engraving
Right.
in the 1820s. It's only been going since 1820s. And Baphomet is actually a mistranslation of a Templar document that actually says Muhammad, because the church thought it was easier to have them worshipping the devil than it was converting to Islam.
Do you,
Which
do you think that they made these names up with the devil and everything to explain the bad things that happen to people? And they say, well, the devil did it. They always have to have somebody to blame. Is that true, Mark? Is that what the word getting?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. The blame game goes on, all the time. I mean, for clarity in terms of spirituality, as soon as human beings sort of drop the blame game and we dump that, once you cease to care about who's actually responsible and start moving forward,
Mhm.
and looking at how you can develop your life and your spirituality and starting to appreciate what's around about, maybe even reading some of the New Testament would help, or whatever. Once you start to go down that kind of a path, then that's how you transform your life. That's how things start to change. But it still goes back to the same motivation as, let's say, the Luciferians and the Satanists, who are still making a choice, a conscious choice to do what they do. So it's true to say we create our own wheel, our own woe. We're either well or we're not well, based on what we decide. We drag into reality that which we create. Um, whether it's real power or imagined power or whatever, that's a debate for another day, perhaps. But
Right.
you
Lucifer,
know,
these occults, we were just talking about vampires, blood drinkers in the Lucifer
yeah.
cult. Now, they say they exist. And also I always heard it said, well, don't join that group. And you know what groups I'm talking about.
Mm.
We do know some of these groups, and I don't want to mention them, but they say you sell your soul to these groups. Can you actually sell your soul, Mark, to a cult like that?
Well, that's the easiest question you've asked me all day. The answer's no, you can't. Your soul is not yours to sell.
Right.
It just isn't.
Right.
That's the bit of you that is going to cross over. And it's not so much about selling that power or that entity or that energy. It's more about what have you done with it? That's where the rubber hits the road.
Mhm.
I mean, if you can imagine coming face to face at the judgment and finding out that what they're going to do is, run a repeat, if you like, of your entire life. Let's get it on the big screen. Let's have a look at this. Let's break it down and see what you've been up to and what you've done. I think a lot of people would very, very quickly change what they were doing if they thought that was how the judgment ran. And at the end of the day, if you get to the end of a judgment like that, the only person doing the judging is you. You're going to be horrified at some of the things you did over the years. You're going to look back and think, oh no,
Yeah.
please don't run this bit again. That in essence is life, and that's what we need to get out of. That's the problem we need to move away from. And like you say, these people that think they're vampires, people that think they're aliens, people who get tattooed to look like, vampire bats or, body modification and just everything. You can go down any club you like,
They're trying to be
LGBTQ,
different, right? They're just
um,
different.
people are searching for, I think, for what suits them. So I wouldn't be critical against somebody. Let's say, somebody decides, I'm bisexual. I'm going to bat for both teams. That's topical. That's modern. That's, up to date. If that's how they feel that they are, well, as far as God's concerned, that's just as bad as, stealing money from your taxes.
Mhm.
Or, somebody cuts you up at a junction and your heart burns and all you want to do is kill that person. You've sort of murdered them in your soul. It's just another bit of stuff. It's just another thing.
Mhm.
But what tends to happen is the way that people are makes them feel whole or complete or comfortable, you know? Um, Jesus, just his attitude. I mean, if you go down the sexuality one, there's a great example because he bumps into the woman at the well, and she says, "Well, I'm getting water for my husband," and Jesus goes, "Well, you're sort of correct. You've had 7 of those," and she's like, "Whoa, how does he know?" And all he says to her at the end of the day was, "Just don't do it anymore. Just go away and don't sin anymore.
Mhm.
Go away. Just be forgiven."
Right.
Move on, change,
Right.
create a different reality, be the real you who you really want to be, and don't play to the tune of somebody else's
I was
beat
just,
somebody
I was,
else's drum.
yeah, just going to ask you, Mark, in closing out this biblical part of it, what could you recommend to people that are very unsettled and stressed out today, Mark? You just said part of it, right?
Well, yeah.
You just part of it, yeah.
Wherever you are, I don't care if you're in the middle of, New York City or you're in the middle of the flipping desert, wherever you are, there's going to be a little tiny bit of nature somewhere, water, trees, grass, birds, anything like that. Just get yourself out of what is human. Get away from humanity and the chaos and structures and buildings and whatever, churches, satanic temples, wherever you want to go, whatever path you follow. Just get out into the countryside somewhere and spend a little bit of time, first of all, with yourself. Take a break, have a couple of days if you want, but even if you can only get like half an hour or an hour, take a break. Take a break from being human, just, and confront yourself. And then, and this is the real kicker, the second bit, just reach out. That it's that simple. It's so simple, it's almost ridiculous.
Yeah.
If there's an almighty out there, talk to it. Just reach out. And you know what? I bet a majority of people get something back. They'll get a feeling, an image, an impression, a sort of a wow factor, an impact, because as much as you're reaching out to, God, whatever your concept is, well, God's there reaching out to you because you're in God and God's in you anyway. So put the theory into practice. That's what I would say. Have a go. That's the starting point of sorting out the problems, sorting the mess out. That's when, almost in a magical sense, things would really begin to change for that individual. But do it somewhere in nature. Go and find somewhere where there's a bit of space. Get away from humanity.
Take a walk in a hike in the park where you can see Bigfoot.
And if you do, come and tell us.
Yeah. Hey, yeah. I want to get this last topic in before we
Yeah.
run out of time. The Real Da Vinci Code. Could you tell us what that's about, Mark?
Well, there's an entire night just on that one subject. We can always come back to that. I mean, you had it was amazing, the Da Vinci Code. It was lovely. I've got a nice little story I can tell you because it kind of rounds us out where we came in a way. Because you had Bajent and Lee, they did their book and they wrote their fantastic book about what they felt were mysteries. And then you had, the Da Vinci Code. That was Dan Brown, and he brought his book out. And they both decided they were going to sue each other because they've stolen facts off them and they've stolen facts off them, and so they went before a judge. Now, from my perspective, this was quite funny because the Bajent Lee book went in at number 2 at the bestsellers, and the Da Vinci Code went in at number 1 in the bestsellers. So number 1 and number 2, and it's these two guys who then go in front of a judge. So you've got a Freemason with 2 Freemasons and another Freemason having a bust up. Now, the judge, it was interesting because the judge was very fair and he said, okay, this is my ruling. Neither books are true. They're both completely fake. That's what the judge said. So you can't sue each other based on stealing facts from one another because none of it's factual. You've made it all up. But, and this is the kicker, you've got, this Freemason and Freemasons and another Freemasons. The books went into the bestsellers at #1 and #2. They made an absolute fortune out of that. So at the end of the day, the moral of the tale is it's a huge money-making exercise. And the factual side of it, the facts are extremely skewed and borrowed. And Dan Brown himself will admit that that is a book of fiction. So people bang on about the Da Vinci Code like it's, it is literally some kind of new gospel, but it isn't. Okay, it's they've fictionalized fragmentary information. That's basically what it is. And then if you want to sort of really go into that information, we might be here for a while. That's a whole night on its own, I think.
I
But
just
yeah, that's
put a teaser out there on this topic right now. They made a couple of movies on it, and I guess the movies made a lot of money too. Yeah.
well, yeah, that's basically it. Yeah, it's fiction. It's what it's what fiction is. Dan Brown's sort of subsequent books, he did the same thing. He cobbled together loads of myths and bits of information he had, but they were nowhere near as successful as the Da Vinci Code.
Could you tell
Um,
us, since it's a long story, could you tell us some of the maybe two or three things that are not factual that were written about?
okay, there's no Priory of Zion. That came about. Pierre Plantard put his papers that started that into a library in France in the 1960s, where they were then discovered in the 1970s. So the Priory of Zion doesn't exist. That's made up. A lot of the stuff surrounding the Templars has been fictionalized. I'm just, the idea that Jesus got married, had kids, and that eventually that ends up producing the female character that's in there, who then kind of follows in the footsteps of Mary. All of that plot, all of that is strung together from things which are not factual. I mean, going back to the actual subject of what we've been talking about, if Jesus wasn't a virgin when he died, then he wouldn't have been a suitable sacrifice to be crucified. So, and again, there's other issues that feed into that, where his caring relationship to his mum's caring relationship to him, and the fact that that carries on to his dying day. Fair enough, he had special folks. I'm not saying that the other Mary, the Magdalene, she was special, but she was special in a sense that she was equal to the apostles, which in a way is more shocking. Everybody would kind of expect Jesus to have a bit of a kiss and a cuddle now and again if he was a single guy, but he didn't, not in the sense that the movie portrays it. Because that translation of the Gospel of Mary, where they've translated it to say that he kissed her, doesn't actually say that. It's fragmented. It breaks up when you read the original. And also, who the hell knows what a kiss means in that context? We don't know. So it could just have been a peck on the cheek or on the forehead or whatever. Who knows? So they made a big deal out of that and fictionalized it, and that's one example of that. But no, he never had kids. There are no biological descendants of Jesus. There are an awful lot of people, however. 23% of the population of Jerusalem had Ishua as a name at the time when Jesus was alive. Ishua is just another version of Joseph, which is it Joseph? I think it is Joseph. Anyway, 23% of people have got the same name. So it doesn't surprise me that people go out evangelizing for Christianity with the same name as Jesus. Somebody called Jesus turns up in India. Somebody called Jesus turns up on the continent. It's Joshua. Yeshua is Joshua. It's the Old Testament name Joshua, which was incredibly popular. That's an incredibly popular Hebrew name at the time that Jesus is alive. Some of his relatives may have had that. We call him Jesus to avoid confusion, because there are other Joshuas in the Old Testament and in the Bible. So we call him Jesus to avoid confusion. It's things like that. Once you start to dig a little bit, the whole foundations for what we view as the Da Vinci Code just start to fall apart. They begin to disintegrate. Was Leonardo da Vinci involved in mysteries? The answer is yes. The Vitruvian Man is probably a representation of crucifixion, arms and legs apart. Various other of his paintings have got things coded in, but you've got to remember it's 1,500 years after Jesus was alive that we had Da Vinci, and the Last Supper, that famous painting, is unfinished, on the refectory wall there. And so the mysteries in that are not quite as they appear. The figure that's always touted as the Magdalene is John, because John was always, the apostle was always shown with feminine traits. Who
Was
knows why?
Leonardo da Vinci, was he responsible for some of this science fiction stuff in Dan Brown's book?
You could say so, because it's the other way around. Dan Brown obviously got stuck in and stole a lot of stuff off Da Vinci, to include in the book. So, when you start digging a bit, I mean, we're only discussing one book here. We're kind of giving a book review to the Da Vinci Code, and it's just every single thing, every major point that crops up has been fictionalized. And I'm not going out of order by saying that. Dan Brown says that, and he's the author. So we've got to bear that in mind when we're looking at that as a book. And it sits on the shoulders of obviously other works and other speculations.
Da
But
Vinci,
again,
Da Vinci is the main character I see that started all this between Dan Brown and everybody. Who was Leonardo da Vinci? Was he a time traveler? Was he an ET? What was he, Mark?
I'll tell you an interesting story. In his sketchbooks, there are over 80 illustrations of different people. He drew the Medicis. He drew a lot of other people that lived in, prominent characters who lived in Italy at the time. And there is one line drawing that they can't identify. They've got no idea who this person is, and it looks exactly the same as me. It's an exact drawing of me, even down to the wonky eye and the curly beard. It's me.
Really?
Now,
Oh.
yeah. Now, what's really funny about the drawing, because this has cropped up in interviews before, is when I had my DNA tested, my DNA goes back to Italy. So it leads me to speculate: was there another version of me knocking around at the same time as Da Vinci? An ancestor 500 years ago. Well, why not? Because that's where my family comes from. Clearly he bumped into somebody. So when we're talking about time travelers, it depends what your definition of time travelers are. He was very much a person of his time, as I am a person of my time. Now, it was known he had 36 different sketchbooks, and only 18 of those, I think, or is it 32? Anyway, over 30 sketchbooks, and only 18 of those have survived. I would love to know what was in his other sketchbooks.
Well, I can tell you, Mark, by knowing you
Yeah.
and everything that you know and all the books you've written and being a musician and a very educated person, I think, yeah, something got into you to lead you in a direction that you're going into.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in race memory. I've got this idea because we've got so much, how can I put it, useless DNA that doesn't seem to do anything. It's so much what appears to be baggage.
Mhm.
But on the subject of what we're talking about here, an almighty creator is not going to come up with something that doesn't have a job. All that DNA has a purpose, and I'm not sure. I'm on the fence a bit about reincarnation and stuff like that, but I'm less on the fence when it comes to things like race memory. And I think all of that, baggage, that extra useless DNA, that carries all the information that has been imparted to us by our previous generations. So we still don't know how to access that information, but do you know what? I think it's there. There's a hot tip for future science.
Right.
I think it's there.
Yeah, I think you're one of them. I mean, you're an intellectual, and I was pushed to do my books 2 years ago. I kept being pushed to do them to help enlighten people about the UFOs and ETs. And I know that you're doing the same thing. You're enlightenment. You're a musician. You entertain people, and I know what that's all about. That's helping enlighten people or letting people have fun. But you're
Are you allowed to call a drummer a musician? Because I always thought that a band was, four musicians and a drummer.
Oh, really? No, actually, drummer is hard work, and you know that.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
play
It is.
drum
It
set
is.
for hours.
Uh,
But yeah, I know how 4 hours of rock and roll
yeah,
music is. You're
yeah,
just you're really tired at the end of the night, and whatever you
yeah.
drank just come right out of you anyway. But no, I think that when you're a person who's been given some skills and a talent, and God says, if I give you a skill and a talent, I want you to use it.
Yeah, don't bury it. Definitely don't bury it.
You're
Do
doing
you know
what
that,
you're told.
that's what you're here to do.
Yeah.
You know,
Just like you said earlier, you're doing what you're told. you know?
Yeah, yeah. If that's what's in you to do, give it a go. For goodness sake, have a go. Be the person that you really feel you should be. That's part of the next step, if you like. Once you've got that relationship with the divine and you've dumped all the baggage and you've moved on, it's not a boring life. It's not a dull life. It doesn't just suddenly, oh, I'm not going to sacrifice myself and it all comes to an end. Quite the opposite. It's almost like you kick the door open, you've gone through it, and wow, that land beyond the door is so much bigger. And that's been my life experience. I've done things I could never have imagined I would have
Yeah.
possibly done.
How many books now? 9 or 10? You're gonna do your 10th book.
Mm,
So, I just know that you're being told, advised from up there, from the great creator to do what you're doing, and I appreciate that. And I think hopefully I'm doing my purpose. I know a lot of older people, they just kind of give up. They don't do much. They don't try to get out there and stay in tune with things. And for me, it's like I'd love to play music again, but nobody hires an old drummer anymore. The younger guys won't hire an old drummer. They said, "Oh, you can't handle it 4 hours."
well, what you need to do is go find an old band,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
which is what I do. I just hang out with old guys. Yeah.
The old guys are good also. I mean, they know how to, do all these other things, so uh yeah, I go for that. But I think you got to live with purpose. And
Yeah.
and if you're doing God's work, enlightening people and maybe helping them find a way, I think that's a very important thing in life. And I just see you doing that. Well, we're coming up on our last minutes. And Mark Olly, I want you to tell us a little bit about your books and where could we find you, and what's going to happen in the near future with you.
Okay. Well, in the spirit of keeping things simple, all the books, all 9 of them, are on Amazon. So type my name in, go find me. I'm on Amazon. That's where you'll get the product from. Pay it, it'll come flying through your letterbox a few days later. It's that simple. There's some great books. I particularly recommend the King Arthur one, but that's just me. Secondly, if you want to see some back catalogue, you want to see some stuff I produced, all my back catalogue now is on YouTube. So you'll find 22 episodes of Lost Treasures, 6 extras, plus about 6 documentaries, plus a UFO documentary. It's all up on YouTube. Type my name in, go find it. The company that's hosting it is called Drake, Michigan. So they're easy enough to find. Thirdly, you want to contact me, Facebook, send me a friend request, and we can talk on Messenger. So that's dead easy. Amazon, YouTube, Facebook. What's coming up? I'm doing the Awakening UFO conference. I'm on main stage on the 17th of February.
Really?
That's coming up. Yeah,
Well, you're
that's
you're
in.
you're adding another dimension to your travels there, right?
Well, it's since I've written this book on Europe's Roswell and the one
Yeah.
on crystal skulls and human heads.
Right.
So I'm doing Europe's Roswell live on stage up at Bolton Town Hall on the 17th for Awakening. And then after that, who knows? I mean, I'm hoping to go back on tour again because I used to do speaking tours before we had lockdowns and what have you. I think I might just have enough bookings this year to go out on tour on the UK. So I've got a few festivals coming up. Come join me on Facebook, and all the dates will be coming up on there.
I want everybody to do that because you're a great guy. I've had you on the show. This is probably the third time, but every time you come, you have more and more to talk about. And we're not done with you yet, buddy. If you come back and we can talk again, maybe I can get over this 30-day cough. I don't know, or 45-day cough almost. But yeah, it's a pain. It's a pain. But I don't want to talk about anything bad because you just tried to tell us everything good about how we're going to live our lives in faith and believe in the Almighty Creator. And then,
It's the future. It's the future. It's where we're going. At the end of the day, you're going to die. That's not depressing. I don't see that as being depressing. You will have the answer. The answer is there. It's going to happen. Nobody gets out of here alive. So I wouldn't worry about, wars and bombs and disaster and, oh, forget all that. If it doesn't affect you directly on a daily basis, then, live life to the full.
there we go. That's good words to end with. You've been listening to Mark Olly with all of his. We haven't even gotten. Oh my goodness, there's so much on his notes here that we could have gotten to. And he warned me, says, "Don't get into too many things." Davey said these are long topics, and they are, but they're great topics. He knows all these details. Mark Olly, thank you so much for being on the show. You've been listening to the Dave Emmons Strange Reality Show, and I'll be back after this. I took a respite for a little bit traveling in the Philippines, but I'm back now. This is my second show. And I did one by myself here just a few days ago, and it's running now. I talked about all my details of my life, and you know, the UFO and ET stuff. I'm gonna write. I'm gonna do a follow up book on. My publisher wants me to do a follow up book on that
Mm.
UFO thing, so I might do that. I got this sci-fi book I want to put out. I got to finish it, and I'm going to put it out. But I'm going to go back and get into the psychology of these ETs and UFOs and how it's affected me, and little intricate things that went on, the synchronicities and all this thing. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like the electricity and all this other.
Yeah.
But yeah, Mark Olly, thank you so much. And this is a strange reality with Dave Emmons. Thank you, and thank you for listening on us. Bye now.